I'd like to take a moment to share with you my theory of web development evolution. First, a little history so we can gain an understanding of what has happened in order to predict what will happen in the future. Around the 1990s, we saw the first graphical user interfaces, giving us a much needed relief from the dreaded green on black terminal screens. Around that time, the HTML specification was drawn up and browsers soon arose that could understand the HTML specification. These web pages were all manually written at first, and since there were no frameworks back then, it was a very laborious process. Around 1994, CSS was drawn up as well, and we could now use CSS in order to style our web pages. In 1996, JavaScript was developed and we started to see the rise of logic being a huge part of the modern web page. Around this time, we got tired of writing web pages by hand, and we instead chose to start writing programs to write the web pages for us. At the forefront of this movement was the Dreamweaver application, which allowed us to draw up applications in a nice graphical user interface without writing a single line of code. During this time, the look and feel of all these websites was rather square and boxy, and is known as the 1990s website look. As time went on, we started seeing more and more libraries pop up to ease the look and feel of websites. Using a simple import, a single import statement could change the look of your entire website. Then we saw libraries like Lodash pop up, where the entire goal was to make the programmer's life easier, doing things like for loops and filtering much easier. Another example like this is AngularFire 2, which allows us to plug into Firebase super easy inside of an Angular project. We also had larger libraries develop like React, where the entire goal was to make a dynamic website even possible and very responsive. Many frameworks were developed as well, such as Angular, which allows you to structure your code in a more scalable way, as well as Vue, Ember. They have similar goals, and then Express is a backend framework with the goal of having the programmer write less backend code overall. But at the end of the day, what are we still really writing? Well, we're still writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that was over 20 years ago that started. And why aren't we seeing any huge breakthroughs in web development? After all, aren't our devices getting smaller and smaller and smaller? Why isn't web development getting easier and easier and easier at the same rate? It's no doubt getting easier, but it's not getting vastly easier. It's by no means a 2x multiple like Moore's law. In order to explain my theory for why we're not seeing any huge breakthroughs, I need to explain the difference between translation and abstraction. Translation is the act of precisely converting information from one form to another form. An example of this might be translating from binary to C. Binary can be perfectly translated into C. No information is lost during the conversion, and the conversion is exact. That's a perfect example of translation. Another example would be translating from English to Spanish. Now, this is a special type of translation I like to call a lossy translation, where it's attempted that a precise conversion is created, but that can't always happen, so people do their best and they translate as well as they can. But the intention of that translation is that it be a perfect conversion from English to Spanish. Okay, so we know what translation is. It's converting precisely information from one form to another. Now, abstraction. Abstraction is the act of representing the essence of a piece of information. And at some point, abstraction is too ambiguous to be meaningful. Let's look at an example in order to illustrate my point. Take the following paragraph. Jane ran across the meadow to gather blueberries for her father. To her surprise, there were no blueberries across the meadow. Jane was afraid to disappoint her father, so she cried for hours before trudging back home. Now, if I asked you to summarize this, you might say something like this. Jane ran across the meadow to gather blueberries. She didn't want to disappoint her father, so she cried. A fairly accurate summary, but we lost some details about that the father was expecting the blueberries, as well as she trudged back home. If I wanted you to further summarize the paragraph, you might say something like this. Jane ran to gather blueberries, then cried. Still fairly accurate, but we lost a lot of information about the meadow. We don't even know about the meadow anymore, and we don't know about her walk back home, and we don't even know about her father. So if I asked you to summarize this even further, then what would happen? You might say something like Jane cried. Well, that is true technically, but we just lost so much information. And so we'll summarize that even further. Well, Jane is the subject, so we'll just say Jane. Well, it's very clear at this point that if you keep summarizing things like that, then at some level of abstraction, things just become meaningless. So now I'm going to show you how this relates to web development. Let's ask the question, can websites be built more abstractly? Because remember, we started out with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then people started building tools to build websites that build websites even, like WordPress or Adobe Illustrator. And while those tools can build websites, they have simply chosen a level of abstraction somewhere along right here where they have just chosen to allow certain behaviors, allow certain buttons to be created, allow certain customizations, but it's never going to be as accurate as the source itself, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so those tools, while they make a great crutch for those who don't actually know how to code websites, and they can be a great tool to build websites quickly as long as it falls within that template, those tools have chosen their level of abstraction and they won't be able to create perfectly custom websites. Now, is there anything that really can create those custom websites in a more abstract way? And what about machine learning? Could we use that to develop websites more abstractly? For instance, could I just tell the computer, I would like a website where users can log in and it looks like Facebook, except all of the buttons are red. Well, that could technically work, yes, but those machine learning techniques are very advanced and many attempts have been made at doing this, and none of them have been successful. So if you're asking, should I be worried? Well, AI is going to take over anyways, and so it doesn't really matter if you're worried or not. No matter what the industry is, AI is eventually going to do everything better than a human being can. But like I was saying, the machine learning techniques are very, very advanced, and it's going to take a long time in order for that to happen. And so should you be worried? No, because there's not really anything anyone can do anyways. It's just going to happen. So that is my theory of web dev evolution. My name is JamieBot. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts on web dev evolution? And I'll see you guys in the next video.